I'm looking forward to the day where it's not triggering, where I don't go right back to feeling like I'm in that person's shoes.
No shit.
Yeah.
No shit. All right, y'all, welcome to the JudgeMental Podcast. We are going to talk about the viral clips of the week from judges on social media. We're going to talk about why both of us, Hugh and I, left the practice of law after 30 years combined between us. We're also going to give some advice for how to deal with these judges, not legal advice, but just kind of how to conduct yourself in court. Thank you so much for tuning in. You want to jump right into the judge that snapped at the old guy?
Yeah, well, first I want to say, thanks for tuning in. And for content ideas, we'd like to hear from you guys what you want us to cover, what types of things related to court, judges, those types of things. We want to make sure we hit content that people are looking for. Also, shout out to Three Floyds Brewery for a phenomenal beer, drinking a gumball head today.
So it's been one of those days here. I'm sitting here sipping my iced tea, but Hugh was ready to imbibe, and I'm jelly.
Needed to.
Sir, let me answer the question. Ask the questions, all right? You're finding yourself very close to contempt.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Sirkin, why are you not here?
Your Honor, I received a court notice yesterday.
When did you receive notice of today's hearing?
Yesterday in the afternoon.
No, on paper, when did you receive it?
Receive what, Your Honor?
Good God. When did you receive, on paper, the notice of today's hearing?
I have not received anything on paper of today's hearing.
Then how did you know to call my staff yesterday and tell them that you were going to appear by Zoom?
That's correct.
All right. Okay, but before you do that, why don't you go ahead and have a seat, because I want to address something else. I need to apologize to you for my behavior of last week. It was very unprofessional of me, and you did not deserve that. So I sincerely apologize. I truly let my temper get the best of me.
Your Honor, Judge, that's fine. We all make mistakes.
In my experience was not frequent, but was also not unheard of, where a judge would get very frustrated with someone and they're not getting the answer that they want, even though the person is telling the truth. We have an attorney who did not get any kind of written notice of a hearing. Allegedly, who shows up to a hearing because allegedly they received some sort of tip-off from someone that a hearing was taking place, showed up, and the judge was very frustrated. And the judge just acted very unprofessionally and yelled and acted very condescending and getting frustrated with the attorney. And it seemed to be just sort of the last straw.
Yeah, and I don't even know if maybe the attorney couldn't hear him. This guy is so elderly. I'll tell you, this one sent me to a new level of rage for a plethora of reasons. Yeah. Mainly, I think this shows like the demeanor that some judges have. Like, this judge should be removed from the bench for that behavior in and of itself.
Well, I think somebody talked to him about it, and to his credit, he apologized to the attorney's face. I think he was upset because the attorney was appearing by Zoom.
Yeah.
And I think the attorney was presumably appearing by Zoom because he had just received notice of the hearing, hadn't received formal notice that there was going to be a hearing. He found out from some confidential source that there was going to be a hearing, and he wanted to make sure it didn't take place without him being there as an attorney for a party in interest. Naturally should not go forward without him there.
Right.
And was being dressed down terribly for it. Now, I know that clip at the end is the judge apologizing in person, so there was obviously at a later date where that attorney was there in person, present in the courtroom, which needed to happen.
I think it was the next week, and I don't think an apology suffices there. Like, and I think this is the bigger picture. There is, in my opinion, there is zero way that judge would behave like that outside the courtroom. And so that judge is aware that that's inappropriate behavior. And I think we see that a lot with judges. Like we've talked before on this podcast, there's no way some of the judges, the way they have spoken to me and my clients, would ever speak to me like that on the street corner. Ever.
I mean, a judge, you would never expect someone to walk up to you on the street and talk to anyone, let alone someone that the judge has to have a professional relationship with, someone that is practicing in that judge's court, that if that happened outside of the courtroom, that would be completely unacceptable. But
it's
inside
an elderly
the
person.
Well, and someone who was just being grilled on
Yeah.
why he was there by Zoom when it's
The judge's
clear.
staff is the one that fucked up.
Well, I don't know who did it, but if what he is saying is true, he didn't get written notice of it, and it's only because someone tipped him off that he actually was there. And God knows what would have happened if that hearing had gone on without him there and he didn't have notice. Then you'd run into so many problems. But if you were that person's client, how in the world would you have an expectation that your judge was going to be objective on your case if a judge acted that way toward your attorney?
Right.
And this is something that, while I didn't have that situation that often, although there were one or two judges that if they were in a bad mood, you could expect that kind of behavior either toward a client or toward the attorney. And you could tell within the first minute and a half of a proceeding or a motion hour how that was going to go. But from a client's perspective, I've seen that happen to where I've had to argue with a judge over a call that wasn't correct, that was dispositive or was highly prejudicial to my client's case. And it was clear to me that the judge, there was something that needed to be explained and it would change the ruling on it. And I always went about it very quietly. Wasn't perfectly stoic. I showed emotion in the courtroom, but I didn't get upset. And I always tried to be very gentle and in sort of explaining things. And you would be met with the kind of reaction we saw in that video.
Yep.
And then, as happened in that case, the judge realized that he was incorrect and the attorney was correct. And that will happen in the courtroom, and the judge will then reverse their ruling and let something in that you needed to get in, or exclude something that should under the rules be excluded. But then the client is left with an impression that no matter what happens at that hearing, what I would find is I would go through the rest of the hearing. If we performed very well, that moment is what stuck in the client's mind.
Well, also, do we know if this judge just apologized because the clip was going viral or because they knew someone had leaked it on TikTok, or was it genuine? Because in my experience, grown men or women don't huff and puff and behave like that in a professional setting as a one-off. That's a general standard practice.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that I never saw it from a judge just one time.
Yeah.
I practiced regularly in front of them. My guess, and it's just a guess, but from a lot of experience, is that judge had good staff. And a lot of times, if you have staff that's been with you for a long time and can speak freely with you, when he finished off the bench, he was told in no uncertain terms by his staff that you can't act like that. Do you realize what just happened? And how you reacted to that attorney was very unprofessional.
What do you think his punishment should be?
Oh.
If any.
From a one-off instance like that, which is all we know about,
Okay.
all we saw the clip, he apologized. He apologized professionally. The attorney handled it very well. I think that's it. If it's one time, a face-to-face apology.
Not for me. You know what I
Okay.
think should happen? I think he should have to go down to like an IGA in Eastern Kentucky, find the oldest person shopping there, go up to them, speak to them like he spoke to that elderly attorney, and then whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, the way that I saw the clip, it seems like an ancillary fact that the attorney is elderly. It doesn't seem like the reaction from the judge was coming from something that resulted from the attorney's age. I mean, I think that there should probably be, growing up in South Carolina, certainly there's a level of deference and respect that you owe to your elders.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think the two things, I can't tell if that's related or not, or if the judge was just in a bad mood and the person, whoever it was that was there appearing by Zoom, was going to get that kind of treatment no matter who.
I guess I could see that. I just think that it's a notion that there's no way. I mean, we could take it out of Eastern Kentucky and we could say, let's go down to the 32nd and West Broadway and go up to somebody an elderly person or a young person and speak like that, and then
you
whatever happens.
You would get slapped, and you should.
Oh, I mean, you get, and the thing, that's the point, is like he would know better not to behave like that.
Yeah.
So he puts this black robe on and gets judge-itis and just thinks he can speak to someone like that. And that just like a simple apology is going to cut it. I mean, that made me sick. And
Well,
I
it's
think,
because you've been through it.
yeah.
It brought back the feelings of you sitting in the courtroom, and that's happening, and you're powerless.
Mm-hmm.
And you're wondering, oh God, how do I explain that? What do I have to tell my client after this?
Ding,
Because
ding, ding.
I'm right. I didn't do anything wrong, but
Right.
I'm being dressed down, and they're going to think naturally this judge wouldn't be mad if I hadn't done anything wrong.
Yeah, that's so true. Also, I just posted our clips of us talking about the judge that used to get mad at everyone, and the comments in the DMs, and just some of the pro se people that responded.
Everyone knew who it was.
Oh, yeah. Actually, it's funny. One person suggested another old attorney, which she was a little out there sometimes too. But
Old attorney or old judge?
Judge. Yeah,
Oh, okay,
judge. Yeah,
okay.
I'll tell you later. But the traumas, the power that these judges have, and the fact that they don't, quote unquote, realize it, or if they do realize it, they're just utilizing it to be abusive. And that's where I really struggle, because I just struggle that any human being, it's the same thing with like domestic violence, right? Like, you yell at your significant other at home, or you tell them horrific things in private that you would never do in public. It's because you know better.
Sure.
It's a bad look. And these judges, in particular, the judge that we talked about previously, would never speak to any of us like that off the bench. It was something that happened the second that she stepped foot on the...
Yeah. And do you know what type of proceeding
Nope.
that video was from? So on this podcast, we talk a lot about family court. And if it were just attorneys appearing before a judge for a pretrial case management conference, it would not be excusable, but it would be easier to understand. Where the judges that could talk very frankly with the attorneys, I oftentimes liked that, but only if everybody could just lay it on the line and cut the BS while you were talking at a pretrial. If you were off the record or sitting in chambers, not ex parte, but like everyone together. I appreciated that. I'm not saying that just treating somebody like that in general is okay.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about family court, there is a much higher level of sensitivity because of the issues that we're dealing with. Sometimes it's just financial. Sometimes people are being petty about something financial that has very little value, and it's just the emotions and all, and the judges will get frustrated. But for the most part, people are there arguing over the most important things in their life.
Yeah.
And when it comes to people's children, and you see a judge acting like that and getting frustrated and not wanting to spend the time to get to the bottom of something so simple about maybe everyone should receive adequate notice of a hearing that has a substantial impact on the case. When you see that happen in family court, it's chilling, it's shocking, and it's a terrible experience to have to sit through, because you have to sit there and say, yes, judge, thank you, judge.
Your Honor,
No
Your
matter
Honor.
Your Honor, no matter how, yeah, depending on which courtroom you're in, no matter how they're treating you, and you have to immediately start thinking, well, how am I going to explain this to my client? Because they're going to think I did something wrong because the judge is in a bad mood. But it's even worse when you see that happen to a client.
Yeah.
And I've sat through a trial where that happened 2 or 3 times in the course of a full day trial. And opposing counsel came up afterwards and said, wow, does the judge know your client? Like, why does she hate her so badly? And it's just every time she would say something, the judge would roll her eyes and cut her off and just get to the point. And it was from the very beginning. And I'd kind of seen that before at a previous hearing. So we had scripted out, not scripted. We had gone through question and answer. There was no rambling. There was no extraneous information. There was, I'm asking a very specific question. You're giving a very specific answer. We're building our story. We're putting on the evidence that we needed. It wasn't something where, I mean, we've all sat through testimony that just meanders and wanders and everybody in the courtroom is tense and frustrated with it. It was not that. And the judge was treating it like it was the most pointless thing in the world. It was just so not worth her time. And you don't get past that.
No, it makes me physically ill to think about. And we talked on our first podcast about how attorneys need to speak up. And, you know, I think it's great in hindsight to think about all the things I've done since I left the practice or that we're doing now. But then if I had $1 for every time I didn't speak up when something like that happened.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, there's a lot of guilt that comes with that too.
Oh, no, I agree. But it's always the question of what do I do? This is not, so if a judge is acting it's like anyone acting irrationally, you want to have a rational response to it. But then you have to think, is that going to make a difference because they're acting irrationally anyway? So if they are mad about something and they're treating someone in some outsized way, what is the appropriate thing to do?
Yeah.
If we were giving advice to young attorneys who are experiencing that, what would you say? Because if you bring it up, no matter how politely you bring it up, I'd say it's a coin flip whether or not you made things worse or not.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think what I would tell young attorneys now is to DM me, send it to me, and I'll put it all over social media. And I'll put it all over, and I'll put money behind sponsoring it. Because I tell you what, like that one judge in particular, I heard a story that this judge said, if y'all can't get along, I can just put this kid in foster care.
Yeah.
And you ever heard that?
No. I've heard this example.
Okay. And I'm going to tell you right now, if I find video of that, I don't even care if it's confidential. I'm going to put it online. I won't do it associated with us, but that is sick. That is disgusting. That is immediate removal from the bench.
Even if it's just a threat to, you threaten people to get their attention. It's a different arena in court.
Yep.
You're not dealing with your own, 5-year-olds who are fighting.
Right.
It's like those types of threats are a big deal.
And I think that is just next level. The scary thing, because I talk to some judges now and they're like, do you realize how stressful our job is? Like, we have people that threaten us. We have all of this stuff. Well, if you have a judge that's threatening to put a kid in foster care because parents can't get along, your beef is with that judge. Because what would you do as a parent if you're going in and you're having some debate about, I don't know, a vaccine, whether or not somebody's going to play soccer, and the judge is like, y'all don't get it together, I'm going to take your kid away.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't be a normal parent, to be honest, if you didn't have a visceral reaction to that.
Oh, and it completely changed my perspective when I had kids of my own. And I saw that for the first time. And I thought, if I was sitting in a hearing in front of someone who has full power to do whatever he wants or she wants with my children, including take my custody away, and they were acting that flippantly about my kids, I don't think I could sit as calmly as my clients do. But I think so much of the time people sit there very calmly because they are in such shock. They don't know how to react. And let me tell you, when speaking to people who aren't represented, when you do react, it is usually gets much worse.
And I think that's kind of the cycle that we need to break. I mean, really and truly, it's a cycle, like a cycle of domestic violence, a cycle of alcoholism, a cycle of coercive control, the cycle that these judges have gotten themselves into where it's one big club, you're not in it, and we can do whatever we want without consequence. Time's up, I think that's the point.
But you see the opposite as well. I mean, you see judges, especially judges who have kids, and those moments where they relate to people that are sitting there. I know you think this is a big deal, and I'm here to solve this and help you through it. But let me tell you, my kids are a few years older, and this is going to be nothing. Like I'm okay with sometimes you sort of, it's family court requires sort of a different touch, I think, than certain other things. But I think erring on the compassionate side and completely ruling out any of the overreactions or being flippant is the only way you should deviate as a judge on the family court.
Hell, I can't think of a time, though, that empathy is not going to be beneficial to anyone on the bench. I mean, why else take the job if you can't empathize to see two sides of every story? Even in criminal court, though, I mean, you have to understand, have you ever read a PSI?
I don't believe I have.
That's a pre-sentence investigation. So every time you're charged with a felony before you get sentenced, they'll do a PSI. And in that PSI, they'll talk about literally every twist. And that is basically the background of any sort of dependency, neglect, and abuse action that's happened to somebody. And you will see the scenario. A lot of times people don't get where they are in a vacuum, actually most of the time. And the horrific things that people experience in their childhood or experienced in their life. And maybe this is why they're addicted to substances, or maybe this is why they act the way that they act. And so when sentencing them, the best judges I ever practiced in front of didn't point their finger like, how dare you, you son of a. It was just, this is your sentence. This is your consequence. Please, while you're in custody, get treatment, address these issues. You're still a human being.
Yep.
And so I just don't think, this isn't Venezuela. We aren't supposed to just decide one way and then stone someone. Not that they stone people in Venezuela, or do they? I don't know. They may. I mean,
No,
I don't.
It may drag them off to a prison they're never heard from again, but I don't believe stonings are general practice. And I remember, I'm trying to think if this is confidential. No, I was involved in a case, and the father had been shot 6 times in the chest, and still ended up without custody of his kids. The wife and mother of the kids shot him 6 times, invited him to the house, had him sit down on the couch, went to the back, grabbed a gun, walked in, and blew him away. And so you can imagine all of the things that the judge might have to make her the better bet for having custody of the kids, how bad it must have been. But I remember him in court sort of impassioned when he realized that no matter what he did, things weren't going to change that day. He said something, but I was their father and I've done it. And the judge stopped him, and I thought she was going to dress him down or something. She said, no, I'm going to set the record straight. We're going to get this really clear right now. You are their father, not you were their father. My ruling today does not take that away, and I want you. And it was amazing to me that the judge said, okay, we've got things we need to work on. There are things that we need to remedy. This is step 1. I'm not taking you out of these kids' lives. These are my expectations. You will always be their father. You're important to them. That kind of stuff I thought made a difference in people's lives.
Absolutely. And I can go down the rabbit hole of talking about all the negative stuff that judges have done. But there was a reason I was an attorney for 15 years, and I had some great judges. And I did have a judge that yelled at me once, and I appeared before him thousands of times. This is when I was a public defender. And he did. He snapped at me one time, and I remember he looked at me afterwards and was like, my bad. After court, was like, the look on your face was just sheer shock. And it was kind of like, oh my God, Daddy just yelled at me. Because he'd always been, now he was stern and all of those things, but that is not how he conducted business. This is Willie Roberts out of Eastern Kentucky. And one thing that he always did in particular, and I hope he doesn't get mad about me talking about that, but he did juvenile court. And he would tell those kids, every client I had, when you graduate high school, I'll be there. You know what I mean? Or when you have this big thing, I'm going to be there. And he went. He actually followed through with it. And now we're not talking about a district judge in Louisville. They have dockets. They handle 4 counties. And he always went, and he never took a picture of it. But that's the kind of stuff. Did he change every person's life? No. But did he change some people's? Yes. Yeah. And those are the stories that we need to highlight for the good. I'd love to hear from some of my prior public defender clients about things that judges or attorneys did for them, or how the system really helped them, because there are so many of that. So yell at me when I go down my rabbit hole.
Well, I've also seen judges that say, look, I can empathize. If you were asking me just as a human being, and these would happen in civil cases where you were having maybe a pretrial, or you were talking in chambers about what issues you were going to proceed on, which ones might be good for mediation or something like that. So docket control.
Yeah.
And you'd be sitting in the back, and the judge would say, I could empathize. I would feel exactly the same way your client does. But legally, you're going to have to prove X, Y, and Z before I could see that there's a claim there. Just because, this obviously happened. This was a bad thing that was traumatic. It doesn't mean that there's a legal claim. So there's a difference between empathizing and ruling for someone. It's just being human while still carrying out your duties as a judge.
Yes. I think that maybe one of the missing components for a lot of judges is just that human component. And I think that we've seen that just in the last 3 to 5 years. Really, I think it has dramatically escalated. Am I wrong?
It's always hard for me to tell. I litigated for almost exactly 20 years before I decided to try to take the next step of my career in my life. And oftentimes, I think people look back on the past as better
Yeah.
There's this fallacy that, things were better in the past. But I tend to think that you are correct, that things have gotten far worse. They've gotten far less formal. And there seems to be, and I think, honestly, this mirrors society in general right now. There is a difference in the level of respect that's being given to other people, but I think it's mirrored in the courtrooms. And I think attorneys get frustrated and don't show the same respect for the judges as they used to. But it's sort of like with kids, when parents are nasty to kids and they say, "Why are you disrespecting me?" That's all you've taught.
Mm-hmm.
That's a reaction that you have to expect. If you treat other people with disrespect all the time, you're going to get it back. But I think that that's happening throughout society, and we're seeing it reflected in our courts. But what you and I saw being family practitioners is how that change in the discourse had huge impacts on families. It wasn't just, well, I'm not going to find that your fender bender was all his fault, and it'd be one thing. But when you're talking about someone's kid, something that is going to have lifelong implications, and you're doing it flippantly or not paying people the respect of listening to their case, and you're just watching your watch and watching your computer screen, it makes a big difference.
Totally. And that's just a segue for everybody listening. We're both licensed attorneys. I left for sure because I was at my breaking point. I mean, there was many straws, but there was one thing that broke the camel's back. And you're a licensed attorney 20 years in. Let's kind of talk a little bit about why you left. How long did you want to leave before you left, finally?
Oh, that's hard to say. It's once I was out and I realized how different I felt as a human and how much healthier I was and how my mindset was after I left, I realized that I had been in a bad place for years. I think I started noticing it getting very bad, I'd say about 5 years before I left. And it involved panic attacks and involved just being generally unhappy. And early in the career, when you're building a practice, you work long hours, but you're into it. And you care about your cases. You want to fight. If you're a good attorney, you want to fight for your clients. You personalize it oftentimes in family court way more than you should. And it's unhealthy, but you work those long hours. That's not what was getting to me. It was a lot of what we are talking about. And I pulled back further because I built a big practice in 6 offices in 5 states, and we were growing very quickly. That part was very satisfying.
Yeah.
But the times I was spending in court, you were just there were a lot of problems for me. Part of it was this breakdown that we discuss on this podcast. Another part to me was the law office model, I think, doesn't serve clients very well. I think the legal industry is broken in a lot of ways, and something I will discuss more on my personal podcast. But I think there needs to be innovation. There needs to be some change in it. And I sort of hit the 20-year point and reflected back. Do I want another 20 years of doing the same thing? Making a lot of, I was making very good money. I was at a great stage in my career. I wasn't having to practice day in, day out, but I wanted something different. I wanted to make a difference.
So let me ask you a question, and this is kind of heavy, but if the judges weren't how the judges are, would you have stayed longer, you think?
It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it was just there's a significant point in my career as 20 years, and I just sort of had to decide if things were changing or anything interesting was happening in it. I think I would have been in a more optimistic place when making that decision. I think I came to that decision, that inflection point, feeling like I was working just in a broken system from every single direction. And you felt kind of defeated, like you just weren't able to make the difference that you wanted to. Yeah. So I don't know. It's very hard to say if it was different, but I think if I was able to feel I was making the difference in clients' lives that I felt like I was making 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I might have stayed there. That different level of satisfaction may have been there.
And I think it's because I love going to court. Like, actually, when we did our walkthrough the other day, you were like, I don't miss this at all. And I'm like, I miss it so much. Like, I really do miss practicing, but I couldn't go to court. Like, I knew every single time I went to court that it was going to be, for lack of a better term, just a shit show. There would be no order. It would either be a continuance would be granted without anyone asking for it.
Yeah.
People would be 20, 30, 45 minutes late. The judge hadn't read the motion, or you would be yelled at, or even worse, it would be like just you go down a rabbit hole of something that wasn't even before the court and somehow get an order of something that had nothing to do with what we'd prepared for in court. And it just, you couldn't prepare your clients. And I dreaded going to court with every ounce of my being because I knew, one, I mean, you can't prepare and be productive in that environment, and that's our job. And two, you're going to have to go out and have a conversation with your clients. Like, if I could record some of the conversations that I had after we left the courtroom, it would be a TV sitcom.
I started that conversation while we were sitting in the courtroom. I found that passing notes back and forth or leaning back and whispering just to get ahead of, this is not, yes, this is different than what I told you was going to happen. Here's why it's different, and, sort of to prime them for it, because I wanted them to pay attention to the next, to take very seriously the next things that happen and not be too distracted by something just out of the ordinary that would happen that was not proper earlier in the hearing.
I mean, it would be a regular occurrence. And this is kind of off topic a little bit. I guess it's not, but I get a lot of calls from attorneys. I think last week I got 21 calls from different attorneys. And I had one of the attorneys be like, oh my gosh, I told you not to say anything about something. I'm like, I didn't say anything about something. And they're like, I watched your TikTok about how an FOC didn't meet with a client. I'm like, honey bunny, bless your heart. That's happening. That's happening this moment.
Oh yeah, all over the place.
Right.
I mean, I would regularly, very regularly subpoena the billing records from the FOC before my hearings, just so that I could substantiate from their billing records that they did not have meetings to prepare for that hearing.
And so FOCs are investigative bodies for the court, they're attorneys, but a subpoena is a court order, and you're entitled to that, right?
And people treated me like it was the worst thing in the world.
Who's
I was
people?
FOCs. Sometimes the courts, when I would try to enforce those, because they oftentimes were ignored or told that I'm not answering that. I'm a court-appointed FOC. I don't have to answer your subpoena. Oh, yeah, you do. You're a witness. You're an expert witness in this case. And it was sometimes hard to get judges to enforce those. They always did, to their credit, but it was very unusual to be doing that, and people would get mad. But it was very important, because I would say, okay, you say you met with your clients. You say they provided this amount of information. I'm looking at your billing records. You didn't bill anybody for meeting with a client on those days. Could you be wrong about the days? Can you check your phone and check your calendar to see what days you had those meetings? And most of the time when I would ask that, they wouldn't look at their phone. They would just kind of look at me just like, yeah, I'm caught. What's going to happen?
So they were saying they met with the kids?
Oh, yeah.
And hadn't?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of thing, like, I just did a TikTok about how if your GAL or your FOC is not meeting with the child or children, it should be reported to the judge. And I think that goes without saying. Now, I don't know that the judges will do anything.
In the instance that I'm thinking of, the judge ruled strictly along the lines of the FOC report, despite the fact that never met, despite the fact that I think had not returned a call or an email to my client in 4 months. And the ruling came out exactly as the FOC report went. Now, it got overturned. So, but, the client had to wait almost 2 years. And meanwhile, what we were talking about is the suspension of his parenting time. So during that 2 years while we waited for the appeals, no unsupervised parenting time.
And the expert witness hadn't talked to the client or talked to the person for 4 months.
Yep. And actually admitted that all of the information he had gotten was from the therapist, not the children.
My word. And I think talking about some reform stuff, we can really, I think we need to change Rule 6, which is a family court rule. But I do think
talk about Rule 6.
Well, Rule 6 is the appointment of third-party individuals that get immunity and they're court-appointed. They bill hourly, blah, blah, blah. I cannot speak today. A friend of the courts, guardian ad litems, custodial evaluators, parenting coordinators. We need to have much tighter regulation on that. And I think it should be standard operating procedure for the FOCs to include their bill in their report. And I think that's, without question, something the legislator has the authority to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that we have rules very specifically about FOC reports that say they have to file reports and they have to do it 10 days ahead of time. They have to give it copies to everyone and make their file accessible. How often was that happening when you left the practice?
Zero.
How
Nunca.
many times in the last week have you heard people talk about cases, or you've seen people arguing motions where there's been no report filed whatsoever in violation of the rules and nothing done about it?
I think when I told you that the attorney was like, you told my story. And I was like, I have 14 examples in calls this week of either FOCs or GALs, that would include both, not having met with the child or children in relation to that hearing coming up. And that's the other weird thing that GALs and FOCs will do is they'll meet with the kid like September of 2021. They'll be like, of course I met with the kid. It's like, well, it is July 2025. Right? You know what I mean? Like I just don't understand how judges, how they don't see it. Do you?
Oh, I know that they see it, but from my experience, is that you have this small group of people that do this work for the courts, and they are such an indisposable part of the court system. And I think that, from what I've heard nationwide, they're a part of most family court systems. And the judges have gone on to rely on them to do part of their work. And so they look the other way when those things happen, because what can they do? Stop appointing this person? It's not like every attorney is holding themselves out there to do it. Now, there are court systems. I have colleagues and friends that practice in jurisdictions where everyone is one big pool of attorneys and you get appointed to do that job, and there are guidelines to it, and you get in trouble if you don't do your job. So they have a large enough pool. Now, when you're dealing with family law cases, do you want to have GALs or FOCs that haven't been through training or anything? You've got other issues with that. But what we're really seeing is contracting out fact-finding for the judges, and you can sit in a hearing and you can prove on the record that the FOC didn't speak to the children, only got input from one side of the case over the last 4 months prior to that hearing. And I just regularly would see whatever the FOC went anyway. The judge didn't make any findings about them not doing their job, or that what they reported to the court might be old because they haven't spoken to one side or the children in 4 months. And they would rule just on what the FOC said because it makes their life easier, the person they appointed. And they know that most of the time, if you rely on what an expert says in court, you're probably not going to be overturned.
Which gets to the bigger picture of just the nefarious cycle of all of it, which is why anyone that participates in that knowingly, I mean, it's got an aspect of it that feels, I don't want to use the word criminal, obviously. I mean, some people may. I mean, if you're talking about like the mafia or something, some people may, but it feels like a machine that is designed to protect the people within it without any regard for how it affects families or children.
Sure. No, I agree. And one of the bigger examples, we talk a lot about the jurisdictions where we practiced, and largely Jefferson County, but I think from people reaching out to us, this clearly applies everywhere, or it applies a lot of places nationwide.
Yep.
We have statutes that talk about if there is dependency, neglect, or abuse of a child, the case has to go through certain steps and has to go through during a specific period of time. There are ways to waive that period of time, but there are very specific requirements for waiving that time period and moving forward in a certain way. It is such regular practice for things to go 3 to 4 times longer than the statutory period with no explanation to the parties who have to waive those time periods. And when I've raised it in my practice, I've always been told, that's just the way we do it here.
Yep.
And you just hear that phrase made me more upset than anything I heard during my whole practice, where there's something that's so clearly against a statute, violating people's rights, but it's just the way we do it here.
Yep.
And it's the same people that would say it. It's the same people that are utilized by the courts over and over. And you're right, it's a machine. Mm-hmm. It's a system, and it no longer serves the purpose that it's there for. And it doesn't serve the children that it's there to protect. Specifically, dependency, neglect, and abuse cases are there to protect children's safety. Mm-hmm. And when you just start coming up with your own rules and your own practices for convenience rather than for the protection of the child, you're no longer carrying out what the statute established jurisdiction in that court for.
100%. And that's where it just gets weird to me, because we want to talk about all these good judges. And again, there are great judges, but the fact that they know this is happening and still pose for photos with them or still like their social medias. I was even talking, there was something that came up with one judge, and it was so frustrating because I know that this judge, how one particular judge may feel about the way other judges behave, but, posting with them, doing that stuff is condoning it, in my opinion. Is it? Yeah.
If you know what's going on.
Yeah.
So,
if you know what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, I've had conversations with some judges about the behavior of others, and they have done things, been behind the scenes, but speaking to the right people to try to get things changed. Yeah. I know a particular judge, this is probably 10, 15 years ago, who had her computer screen taken off the bench because another judge received too many complaints from attorneys. That judge was shopping online during hearings. So I know some judges do speak out. My question is, again, I think we covered this or we talked about this briefly at another podcast. If I'm 2 floors up from you, you're a judge that's acting improperly, I'm doing my job and sitting up on a docket, how do you know how someone is behaving on a very specific closed door docket? How do you know that your colleagues are behaving that way? And I think part of what I want to do here is make sure that everyone knows it. And then maybe people can change their behavior.
But I just think that it's one big club. We ain't in it. And I don't understand why they want to be in it so bad. Like, you're going to sell your soul for $160,000 a year?
No, I don't believe that at all. I think a lot of people, just like in any political position, go there for power. But I think there's plenty of people that want to do right by their community and do a good job in the community. And I've seen some judges who just genuinely want to get it right to the point where they also ignore the law. I've seen issues there, but it's just, I've never had any doubt why those judges work in those jobs.
Well-intentioned. Right. But what I'm saying is, the ones, like, we have this very clear, like, why I left the practice was because of one particular judge, an ex parte situation. Why I got on social media is because of what I refer to as the TikTok judge. But the backstory there is the judge had a setup on the bench where she could secretly selfie record herself during court proceedings. Now, we're unclear of how often this was happening. I think it was happening much more than what she posted. But there are pro se people coming crying about a domestic violence scenario, talking about their children, and she uploaded it to TikTok, hashtag TikTok judge, hashtag domestic violence. And I thought, surely to Christ and all the things, this will be enough to have her held accountable. Sent it to all the judges. I don't know a single judge in Louisville that hasn't seen my post about this. And yet, that judge is still on TikTok today. She's still on the bench, and the other judges associate with her. Why?
That's a good question. If I were on the bench and that was happening, I don't think I could. I don't think that I could handle that the same way. I wouldn't be able to.
There's never a scenario in which I would. Even if I was friends with someone, I would be like, listen, Lizzie, you crossed a line. You can't be in charge of that anymore. Anyone that thinks that's an
conversation would go, what the hell were you thinking? That's how the conversation would go. Like, how, on what planet would it be acceptable for you to be hearing someone's domestic violence case that affects custody and affects their children, and for you to be live, like recording for your TikTok channel and using that for self-promotion?
Yeah, it's insanity on every level. Yeah. And I just think that that's the same thing. Like, if you watch, like, George Floyd, for example, it's like the cop that actually committed the M-word, but there are 4 other law enforcement sitting there watching, not doing anything. And it's like, you want to look at how many times was that cop, did that cop do something that was out of bounds? And the other cops are like, oh, well, I mean, that's just my cop buddy. And, oh, Christine, you don't understand. We were at a Christmas party and we had a cocktail together, so we took a selfie. It's like, there has to be accountability. The people you associate with and the behavior that you're well aware of, that you still continue to associate with that person, in my opinion, almost you're more culpable than the person that did it.
Well, there weren't other judges sitting in the courtroom when that happened, but we do know they all know that it happened.
Yeah, now.
Now, do we know whether someone spoke to the bar, or that anything's been done behind the scenes, because you know as well as I do that these things are handled behind the scenes, whether it's attorneys or judges, the regulation of it, any changes, redirection, any, polite punishment that's private, all of that stuff is handled behind the scenes. So we can't know whether colleagues went and said, "What the hell are you doing?"
Right. But we
I
do
can't
know
know
that
that.
judges still post with her, which to me is just, I don't understand if there's 39 of them, why 38 of them haven't gone to her and been like, listen, we got a good gig here. Okay. We're not in a courtroom at 1:30 on a Tuesday, and you done pissed Christine Miller off. So could you please just get off TikTok for like 1 week?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you do that?
Maybe. I mean, I think I would. Yes, I would personally. I would say you're bringing heat on all of us, and you're making everybody look bad.
And what you did was terrible, unequivocally.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But there are rules, for instance, that say that you shouldn't be promoting one political party or another, or a political candidate. You shouldn't be online attending political events, because your job as a judge is to be impartial and to seem like an impartial arbiter of whatever's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the same reason, I think you cross a line with a lot of the social media that we see.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think judges' accounts that use the name judge in the account should, by the public, be viewed as official accounts, even if they are not set up by the state or the city or the county or the federal government. If you're holding yourself out as Judge so-and-so,
Absolutely.
and you're posting pictures of you at lunch with attorneys, then clients on the other side of cases are watching. They look at everything that their judge does. They look up what the opposing counsel does.
Mm-hmm.
They watch, of course, what the other litigant does. And when they see a judge, having drinks and celebrating with the other attorney on the case, there is simply no way in the world that they can think that you are impartial.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more.
And can judges have friends? Absolutely. And all of that stuff has to exist, and you have to do your job. But the appearance of impartiality is an important part of the canon of, what is it, the judicial canon of ethics?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, they can have friends, just don't post it on social media. I mean, it's a campaign tool, but the things I have found since looking into this, I mean, there's one judge on the bench that endorsed another candidate. There's a judge that called candidates liars a week before the election. There are former judges still using the judge name that are helping campaign for other judges that are now elected. And all of it just feels insanely wrong and inappropriate. And I think it's because a lot of judges don't have the prestige that they have and that they should have, and the respect for the office that some of what I believe to be the old guard. I just can't imagine. You want me to say something controversial?
Sure.
I just can't believe that old men would have done stupid shit like these women do. I mean, we got too many women on the bench. They're out of control.
Didn't see that coming.
I've said it on other podcasts, and not that I think all women, but at all. Obviously, I am a woman. My nanny, that's my grandmother, couldn't go to law school. I'm first generation attorney. I aspired to be a judge in the past. I ran for judge. But the way some of these women behave, doing makeup, TikToks, and just wanting to get social media likes or to, make the perfect cocktail, it makes me physically ill,
Well, the ones that I've seen that I've had the most issue with my clients' cases have been male judges. So,
and maybe we're harder on what we see ourselves in. Like, I do think
I
I
think that's
hold
fair.
female
That's fair.
judges to a higher account than I do male judges.
Well, I think there's this sense that it's been a job for old white dudes. That's what it has been historically. You want to see it become diverse and women on the bench, and it's one of those things that, well, that's great. It's family court. We should have judges that represent every group, both genders, all of that.
Agree.
But when that's just starting to happen, those first people that are sort of breaking through that barrier, everyone's watching and thinking, oh, like, you're not making anybody look good doing this.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be dancing on the bench, literally, or dancing in chambers or endorsing products from the bench. I mean, That is, to me, radical. And maybe I'm wrong. And maybe judges used
Sound
to do
quite
that.
old-fashioned.
Obviously, I have a personal grudge with her for a plethora of reasons. And anyone listening should be traumatized by the fact that if you go to court, if you are sitting at home right now and your significant other punches you in the face and you call 911 to get help, you run down to the courthouse to file for an emergency protective order, you need to understand that when you go to court and you cry and you say, I didn't cook dinner right and my significant other punched me in the face, you need to understand that that judge may think that is clickbait. That is how egregious what she did is.
Well, imagine if the person, if when you called 911, if you just had to have the expectation that the person taking the call might just record it and be posting it or live streaming it to social media at the moment.
Exactly.
And how big a step is it from that to the point where you're posting a poll, you're posting the clip, then a poll to figure out who's telling the truth or not, and letting your followers tell you who you should rule in favor of.
And I think that's why I have so many followers that are in law enforcement, because they have been held to accountable by society. Now, obviously, there's still outliers and stuff like that. And I'm not saying there aren't problems within the system, but the sheriff's office that are bailiffs in their courtrooms, LMPD, they know good and well if they ever behave like that, it would be on the front page of the Courier-Journal. I know I've said it before, but they are just appalled by their behavior.
Well, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be on the front page of the Courier-Journal if they do.
Oh, yeah.
But I just think that maybe this should also be on the front page of the Courier-Journal.
Oh, I completely
And the
agree.
Courier-Journal, for those who aren't in the Louisville area, is our big local newspaper.
Air quotes for newspaper.
Oh, well.
That's my sarcasm.
I think they're like every other newspaper
It's like-
in any city.
It's funny. I would say that I am, how would you describe me compared to you? That's a weird question.
That's a really broad, open-ended
Right.
question.
This could go a plethora of ways.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I just think I'm more.
I think you like the word plethora more than I do.
I do love that. I say that and fundamental every 5 seconds. If you watch a podcast, it makes me nuts. And I counted on the Love Doc podcast how many times I said that's the fundamental problem. It's like there can't be 14 fundamental problems, you know? But I would say I'm a little bit more dramatic than you. So
you are also prone to understatements, I would say.
So it's like, but that's, I think, what makes the fact that we've teamed up. I think some people are a little bit like shocked about it.
I think that statement might come as a surprise to some of the people that worked under me on my litigation team at my former job.
What was that?
That they would know exactly how court went, because if I was in my office on a Zoom motion hour or a Zoom hearing, they would hear the screaming and they would hear things getting knocked over or whatever, and they'd wait for me to calm down and then come out before asking me anything.
Oh, that's funny.
But
See, I didn't throw that many fits. I have thrown fits at the office for sure, and been so upset about the way a ruling went. But usually I get it all out and then I'm like, chill.
Oh yeah, I have to do the same. Mm-hmm. And I won't want to talk about it. I won't want to post game it until I'm over that.
Yeah.
Especially after a hearing. If I have a half day hearing and I'm in court, I will go sit down, I'll have lunch. I will totally change gears. Either call a client on another matter. That was always a way that I could, make use of the time, but you force yourself to switch gears, or just call, check in at home, just get your mind off of it. And then you can come back and speak more objectively what went well, what didn't go well before you came back. When I was in the moment, it was always, I needed some space before I could talk objectively about what happened. And sometimes I would just be raving. I would never be angry with anyone on my team or do anything like that, but I would come out and they would know that if you ask me about it right after it happened, I will probably just pace around in circles and just talk for 15 minutes straight and do a mind dump of how I felt about everything on it. So I could be a little bit dramatic that way. But then once I got it out,
it was over.
Sit down, organize my case file, put my notes together, get ready for the eventual appeal once you get a ruling in 6-7 months.
Yeah, I actually have wicked low blood pressure. I'm really healthy in that regard. And everyone's like, that's crazy because you're always like, da-da-da-da-da. But I think it's because I just get it out. I don't hold it in. So maybe I could find a happy medium. But to circle back to what we were talking about is when I was a juvenile public defender, we're talking right after the crux of the opiate epidemic. At one point, I represented a granddaughter, a mom, and a grandmother. And heavy stuff. I mean, really sad stuff. And I used to cry after court sometimes and things like that. But it got to be, I would say, probably the last 5 or 6 hearings after court, I would not cry in front of the client, but I would cry. And it wasn't because of even the facts of what happened. It was because I had no control of the situation and felt like a failure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I haven't said much about that aspect of it because it's hard to get people to be sympathetic for attorneys. We're highly paid professionals. Mm-hmm. No one should think, oh, poor you. But when your job, and you know what's on the line in your job, mm-hmm. when you're defending defendants in criminal cases, their freedom, their life is on the line. When you're representing people who are fighting over their children, it's personal. No matter how good you are at compartmentalizing it, and I always tell my clients, I can't be personally involved because then I would be a bad legal mm-hmm. advisor. I've got to be neutral about certain things, but you're always personally vested. But you spend so much time preparing. It stops everything in your life. You don't talk to family. You spend time away from your spouse, your family. I had a couch in one of the offices at work where I would sleep and I would just pull all-nighters and work and take naps. You get prepared for those things. And one of the hardest things to handle for me was going in and all of the prep came to nothing because either it was, oh, by the way, we double booked something. You just have to go home. You're not going to have it. Or, oh, I don't feel like hearing about that today. What I really want to hear, a hearing here, let's change the hearing over to these things, and just not following the rules. And you've put so much time. And I don't know about you, but for trial prep, that's thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars sometimes mm-hmm. that is just has to be completely redone when you don't get to go in there and you don't go through the proper hearing that you were preparing for that day and prepared your client for, and they've taken off work for, and kids out of school and all of that. That was just one of the most jarring things for most of my career, if you were the hardest working and most prepared person, you didn't have to be the best attorney. Mm-hmm. You would get good outcomes. And then you would get better every single year as an attorney, and you would get even better outcomes. When you got to the point where no matter how hard you worked and how much you prepped, it was a coin flip because you didn't know what was going to happen in court or the mood that the mm-hmm. person presiding over it was going to be in. That changed everything for me as a practice.
Yep. And I think this is probably a good place to wrap for the day. What we would like from you is to go to judge-y.com. Also on social media, especially TikTok, if there is a viral lawyer video you want us to analyze, tag Judgy, Judge_Y or at Kentucky.
Excited to see some more videos. I'm looking forward to the day where it's not triggering, where I don't go right back to feeling like I'm in that person's shoes.
No shit.
Yeah.
No shit.
Looking forward to being desensitized on some of it.
We need some justice. My life is fine, justice.